This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I am your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two members of a very secret spy society. This week, I'm joined by Zach McCrary from the Comics That We Love podcast.
What's up? Always a pleasure.
And our very special guest for this episode, Nick Goode.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Thanks so much.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I am super excited to talk about comic books, but I have to jump right in with the most exciting announcement that's happened in IRCB history in our 10 years of podcasting. The IRCB 10th annual Kickstarter, 10th anniversary Kickstarter, Totally Not a Cult, an art scene curated by IRCB, is live on Kickstarter. You guys, you have to go to ircb.fyi/zine, back that thing, make it happen, support it, do whatever you can. We've got limited edition tape cassettes that we're offering, plus the actual zine itself. Go check it out. There's a link in the show notes. I'm so excited. We have 24 pages of art in this thing. Like Box Brown's in this book, Martin Mraz is in this book, Meredith McLaren's in this book, up 20 artists in total. It's absolutely insane. I'm very super excited. I don't know. There's so many words in my head about how excited I am about this. I'll also admit I'm getting over a cold, so my brain is just on fire. But I got to stop talking. I have to introduce our very special guest, Nick. Welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you. For folks at home who maybe don't know who you are, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, of course. I've been writing comics for what year? We were in 2025. 11 years, I think. 11 or 12 years.
Holy smokes.
So I kind of started with a series called Snow the Dawn, which spiraled into a universe after a Comic-Con in Norway, and I met a whole bunch of artists, and it just became this thing. And then, I've kind of just been stuck with it ever since. Like, I kind of keep having ideas for comic books, and I'm like, I'll have to figure out how to create that. So that's me in a nutshell. Just writing comics for a long time, getting older, and talking nonstop about writing and craft and pop culture. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
Gotcha. I mean, and you have a new Kickstarter, right? You've got this brand new Kickstarter that you've launched called Sussex. I guess, could you tell us a little bit about that book? I guess in what it's about and maybe why folks might be interested?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So Sussex, I keep describing this, and I'm going to get used to it because in the campaign, you just sort of said the same thing over and over for 30 days.
Sure.
So it's a psychological thriller that explores mental health through the lens of a spy in World War II. And essentially what it is that it's me kind of having struggled with a lot of anxiety and depression, especially over the last, 10 years or so. Nothing to do with comic books. That makes it sound like it's linked. It's not. But yeah, just a load of kind of like mental health issues. And because I don't feel comfortable writing about myself and I have to put everything through a fictional story, sure. I landed on this story and I thought, you know what, that's kind of the perfect opportunity for me to put down all of these things that go on in my head as I'm living an anxious life. So that's kind of the book it is essentially a spy story, but not an action story. It's very much kind of like a psychological, cerebral. Some people have said it's a bit noir, I guess, because it's got a narration that feels a little bit noir-y.
I can totally see that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of Sussex. It's if you like psychological thrillers or you like explorations of mental health, this is the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, Zach and I got the very nice privilege of being able to take a look at the first chunk of this book, and I can easily say it's a gorgeous looking book. It reads incredibly. It's very fun. We have a link to this in the show notes, so please go check out Nick's book. It looks fantastic. It reads fantastic. I think you'll have a great time. I'm excited to see the next bit of it. Like, I know that's what the Kickstarter is. It's chapter 1 and chapter 2. So hopefully everybody out there will go check that out. But we're not here to talk about that. Not yet, at least. I'm sorry, Nick. I have to cut you off. We're here to talk about comic books, other comic books that we've read. So I have two legally mandated. I'm sorry I'm so aggressive with you. This is the first time you've been on the show.
Stop talking about yourself.
Yeah.
We're talking about other people.
No, we're gonna do what we do on this show every week, and that's talk about comics. So I have a legally mandated pair of questions I need to ask, and that's how have you been? How have comics been? So Nick, let me just kick it right back over to you. How have you been? What have you been reading? What's been going on?
I'm all good, and I have just finished, like in the last day, I think it was. Time is blending together. A book called She's Running on Fumes. So I read the whole first volume of it. which I think is it. I don't think there is another one, although it is labeled as Volume 1, which makes me curious. But essentially, it's written by Dennis Hopeless, art and colors by Tyler Jenkins and Hilary Jenkins, and it's lettered by Hassan Otsman Elahu. And essentially, what this book is about is after reading it, I read an interview with Dennis Hopeless, and he basically said it is autobiographical. I don't know whether it is like one for one or it's just pretty much similar. But it is a story set in the 80s, and it's about the wife of a criminal who starts a chop shop, like she starts stealing cars and doing Grand Theft Auto, because her husband is in a car accident and gets brain damage. And it turns out after this, two people show up at her house, and they're basically like, your husband was running cocaine for us, and it's worth $50,000. So you now owe us that. And this wife has two young kids, and she's like, I have no idea. And so she starts stealing cars. Alongside this, then obviously the bills for her husband, who doesn't die, he has brain damage, just start piling up. And it is just this relentless story of this woman trying to provide for her kids and keep her head above water. And it reads like it is just pacey. It's just constantly kind of moving. But the thing that drew me to it was actually just the art team. So Tyler and Hilary Jenkins did two of my favorite books, which is Grass Kings and Black Badge.
Let's go.
I love these books. And so it pulled me in with that. And they'd written both of those with Matt Kine. And I was like, ooh, Dennis Hopeless writing. How is it going to have that same feeling? Because two of the things I loved about Grass Kings and Black Badge was that they had this weird thing where, like, I wrote an article about this once, but like basically you're like pulled into a community with those two books, and for like 12 issues you basically feel like you're part of them. And especially when you're reading it monthly, it's like every month you're checking in with like the same people. It was a really strange experience, but was amazing. And part of that was the art, because they just draw Tyler Jenkins draws such real people, and Hilary Jenkins' colors like just elevate the whole thing. So I was curious whether with a different writer, whether that's still there. Like it's kind of one of those weird experiments where you're like, is it the combination of art and writer, or is it just one of them and whatever? And thankfully, like this book just works on the same level. Like Dennis Hopeless seems to, possibly because it's a true story for him, but it just takes you on an absolute ride. Like I just fell in love, and it was one of those ones where you kind of just read it in a whole sitting. You're just kind of like, oh, this is incredible. There's these double page spreads which I got to. Like, I was reading it on my iPad because it's a Comixology original, and like every time I turned it and you got that like big spread, you're just like, wow, like that, like I want that printed and on my wall, because it's stunning.
I mean, that almost anything that Tyler Jenkins and Hilary Jenkins does, like it is just mind blowing. Like the amount of talent that those two, like what an incredible duo as a couple, like to put that, to put their artistic abilities together and create such beautiful pages of comics, like over and over and over. And I agree with you. I think I read the first issue of this because our other friend Nick, who's on the show, super obsessed with Tyler Jenkins and Hilary Jenkins's work. And I remember just being like, these guys never quit making bangers. Like, what the fuck is it? How is that possible? Like, it's so good. Sorry. I totally agree with you on that. And I think the unfortunate part of it being a Comixology original is that you can't get the like single issues right printed, but there is a likely chance that you will be able to get the hardcover or at least the collected edition of this book when it comes out eventually through like Dark Horse, I think is who they're paired with.
Yeah, it's usually Dark Horse. It is one of those books that I'll pick up as soon as it comes out as a trade, because the art is just stunning. The whole thing is just insane. And also, like, just to give a shout out to Hass, who lettered it. Lettering is like one of those jobs which I just find insane. Like, it's just always brutal. And some people just have this knack of like making it with like finesse. Like you just read it and you're like, this is the smoothest thing to read. But all of Hass's books that I read that he letters, he like manages to like make it jump off the page. I remember when I started out in comics, somebody said to me that like the best lettering is the one you don't notice. And to me, I was always like, yeah, but also like, what about the ones where you do notice it and you think like, that's amazing? Like, what about that? And that's kind of Hass. Like every book that Hass seems to letter, I am just constantly like, I notice things and I'm like, that's the coolest thing I've seen. So yeah, like this book just seemed to come together as like a parcel where I was just like, wow, like everything about it just landed with me and kind of really connected it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, as far as lettering goes, he's one of like the best ones out there today, and so prolific everywhere. One of my favorites was The Rush. Have you ever heard of the book The Rush? And just like the way, the creativity with which he puts the lettering on the page with like different scripts and kind of making it look like an old, torn letter and stuff like that. I love that kind of stuff, because I'm with you. Like, I am of the mind that the best lettering is the one you don't notice, but I am also of the mind of when you notice and it's artfully done and it works with what is going on in the rest of the art and it doesn't take away from it.
Yeah, it's insane. It is like I think it is like such a talent. Like lettering is just one of those things that I just have such a massive respect for. But yeah, this book was it was all of it. It was so interesting, and yeah, just again, the Jenkins, love him. So.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say about Hassan is that I love his work, right? Like in general, like he's the highlight. I mean, I love Department of Truth just for what it is in its entirety, but like the lettering in that book is incredible. And then I found out that Above Snakes, a Sean Lewis and Hayden Sherman book that they had a Hassan cover where it's just like all of the crazy lettering that he did for that book. And I went very far and beyond to find a copy on eBay, because I genuinely just wanted, like, I like that book a lot, but also just like it's an entire page or a cover that is just all the crazy lettering that he did for that book.
So much
it's
fun,
utterly incredible. I mean, that man is just absolutely talented. Yeah, so of course, natural fit for an incredible book like She's Running on Fumes. Like, I really got to go back and read this because, yeah, I remember enjoying the first issue. I just never went back to it, I think.
Yeah, it's great, and like I do think it's like one of those things that's quite hard, especially coming from like physical reads. Like part of the reason I ended up with the iPad is for single issues, because I think I had a problem with single issues where I was like, it got to the point where it broke a shelf, and I was like, I think you have to recognize you have a problem at that point.
Do you see the overloaded shelf behind me? This is one of 3 bookcases in this small room that I'm in. Like,
when your long boxes take up half of a bedroom, you got a problem.
Yeah. So I was like, I need to curb it a little bit and try and like pick up stuff in paperback and like trades that I like adamantly love, and then do single issues digitally, because then I'm not breaking anything really. That's kind of a thing. But yeah, I think there is like that kind of like initial disconnect of like reading it digitally always takes me a minute just to be like, okay, I've got to get past it. It's not page turning, it's like just scrolling or whatever. But yeah, when it hits Dark Horse, I think it is an absolute pickup.
Absolutely. Well, let me kick things over to Zach. How have you been? How have comic books been?
Oh man, just out here living the dream in cold ass Maryland, and just having a good time. Lots of great comics, lots of great projects, and one of these books that the book that I want to talk about is one of the ones that I've been enjoying the most recently from the Big Two, because I don't do as much Big Two as I used to. Not throwing any shade at them. It's just, I don't know. It's the way my brain's working.
Throw shade. It's fine. If they start putting out good stuff, maybe we'll read them more often. Okay, I'll say it. I'll say what I said. Okay,
he said it. But
I know Danny in the chat is booing me right now. Boo me. I don't care. Did I lie? Did I tell a lie? Anybody?
Go ahead. Tell him when he's telling lies. That's right. And I read Absolute Wonder Woman numbers 4 and 5.
All right, hell yeah, though.
written by like the on fire Kelly Thompson, art by Hayden Sherman, colors by Jordi Belair, letters by Becca Carey. This continues to be must read material for me. Like from the get go, this was my Trinity book. Anyone who hears me on podcasts anywhere knows I am just all about this absolute DC universe. The Superman and Batman titles are both equally amazing, but Absolute Wonder Woman is just everything a 90s metal kid like me could ask for. Like, if you haven't read any of this, folks, the gist is that this is DC's kind of take on what Marvel has done with their Ultimate Universe. A fresh start with bold new interpretations of characters, all in continuity apart from DC proper, instead of going the New 52 route like they did before and just being like, we're going to change the main universe. So far we've gotten books from the Trinity, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. This month, March, if you're listening in the present, we'll be getting Absolute Flash from my dude, Jeff Lemire, and art from Nick Robles. Stoked for that. But this is my jam. Wonder Woman, the last Amazon, sent as a baby to live in hell, raised by the witch Cersei. Like this Wonder Woman is brutal and takes no prisoners when it comes to the evil eldritch horrors coming from other realms to conquer Earth. But to those around her, she remains a steadfast beacon of hope, like the Wonder Woman we know and love. And Thompson has done such a great job of completely separating this Diana from the main continuity version while still encapsulating what makes Wonder Woman so special. And did I mention she rides an undead Pegasus and has a Buster Sword that can change sizes and kill kaiju level threats? Like, what the fuck? This is amazing.
Xander,
I love this.
I need you to just inject like some just very heavy strumming and double bass pedal metal and stuff. I really need that as that description is going on. Thank you.
Yeah, and she also dabbles in dark magics, specifically aimed at aid from Hecate, the Greek goddess associated with magic, witchcraft, the moon, and the night. Thompson brilliantly spliced the origin tale of Diana in with this crazy action. In the present, Wonder Woman has arrived in Gateway City to protect it from an eldritch invasion. We see bloody, brutal violence, but also we're shown her upbringing with Cersei, how it formed her and molded her, and yet how some of who she is was ingrained from the start. And we see Steve Trevor get lost in hell and be rescued by Diana, who makes a giant sacrifice to save him that I don't want to give away until you read the book. Mm-hmm. And again, all while slaying demons, painting her face in their blood, doing witchcraft, and inspiring people she meets. Hell yes. And lest I forget Hayden Sherman, who holds back nothing. This art does an amazing job of sliding between like stark beauty, desperate visions, and brutal violence, none of which ever feels overboard or out of place. And Jordi Belair continues to be one of the best, bringing this art to life and really giving Hell, Gateway City, and Gateway City under Demon Attack very different feels. It's just phenomenal. And we've wrapped up the first arc, The Last Amazon. We're 5 issues in. The first arc is over. And I don't see this comic losing any steam anytime soon. It's definitely staying in my reading list. And I'm going to continue to shout to the heavens, and I guess also to the hells, that everyone should read Absolute Wonder Woman.
So, did you like this book then?
It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Sorry. I mean, listen, Zach, you nailed the description on the head for this book, because it is the most badass comic I've read in a while. And it's like there are people out there who I know are just like, oh, it's just more superhero bullshit or whatever, but like when it's as good as this, like sometimes we need a nice little popcorny action flick, and that's exactly what Kelly Thompson, Hayden Sherman, and Jordi Belair are delivering in this book. I mean, that's a 1-2-3 punch combo. Like, you can't find a book with a better creative team on it right now.
It's so good.
In my opinion. I mean, and it's so crazy. I feel like I've been a fan of Hayden Sherman's work for such a long time now. Like all the way back from when he was doing Wasted Space, and his art was so different than it is now. And I'm so excited to see like how much he has evolved as a creator. And this book is just some of the best work he's ever done. It's like every issue somehow is better and better. I didn't think that I would be like mainlining like 3 DC books side by side the way that I am right now. It's like a diehard lifelong Marvel fan, but to be frank, I'm not even picking up any Marvel books right now. And the only big 2 books that I am actually buying and looking forward to are DC books. This is crazy, the world that we're in. And the 3 being Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Batman, Absolute Superman, and the Absolute Martian Manhunter coming out from our boy Dennis Camp.
Yes, I'm so excited for that.
Freaking Absolute Flash coming out from Jeff Lemire. I mean, like, what is happening right now? What is DC doing? How do they have it so right now? I just don't understand. Anyway, I won't get into that rant. But anyways, I'm so excited and glad that you're also enjoying this. Nick, you've been nodding along with me the entire time about this. Are you reading this book as well?
No, so this is so I've read the first issue of Absolute Batman.
Okay.
One of my friends gave it me at Thought Bubble. Because he had a spare copy, and so he gave it to me very graciously, and I was like, this is incredible, like it's just mad. but it's the 3 books, and especially Absolute Flash, because like I'm a massive Jeff Lemire fan.
Hell yeah.
But the 3 books, I was like, I know I've got the single issue problem, so I was like, I can't do this, but I also don't want to pick it up digitally because everybody who's working on those books, I was like, I need to read it physical. So I've like tortured myself by being like, I will wait for the trades and I'll pick them up like as they hit volumes. And it's been like one of the hardest things we've ever done. Like just constantly seeing like art from it or people talk about it. And I'm like, I'll be there. So I'm kind of like counting down the days for all of it. So I'm really glad that like Wonder Woman has just finished its first arc. So I'm hoping that means that the trade is not far.
All 3 of them are great for a plethora of different reasons. Like they all 3 hit in their own way, and it's been so much fun reading them. I think you're going to enjoy all 3 of them when you get them.
Yeah, I'm dead excited. It's again like day one purchases. Like they will be in my collection, and I will just be like.
Yeah, I'm very excited to get the collected editions of all of these. Period. Like I will at least be getting volume 1s of each of the Absolute books, just because. 1, it's like this is a monumental shift for DC in the modern era, and 2, like they've all been great so far. Like I can't fault them in any way other than them just being big dumb superhero stuff, but that isn't bad, right? Like Paul Jaissle is about to jump through his Prooflistener shell that we put him in for the show to be like, dumb superhero comics are good actually, and he's totally right. I mean, I hold by that idea, especially if they are written well, and all of these are written super well. So
yes. That's the key. Superhero comics can be dumb, but they can also be just as good as any other comic if they are done well.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that the arc wrapped up well. I have not read issues 5 yet of this, so I'm excited to get to that probably after this, honestly. Before the On Cinema Oscar special, I will just be putting myself through all of the Absolute books that I haven't read yet. But let me talk about what's been going on with me. I went to Chicago last weekend and did not see my friends in Chicago. So apologies to Hugh and Ricardo. I'm sorry, you guys. I love you, but I just could not make the time. That said, I did play a lot of Magic the Gathering because I don't know if you guys know, I host a comic book podcast. I'm a huge fucking nerd. And that was fun. I got to hang out with some friends who went to the convention with me for this Magic convention that I was going to. I will say ultimately wouldn't recommend going because I don't think the bang is worth the buck. But it was still a good time to get all of my Magic friends from across the country together into one place for us to play a card game. But other than that, I basically got sick after I got back, I don't know, with some mystery virus, and that is not COVID, as multiple tests have proven. And so I've been on my ass. But in my moments of clarity, I did sit down and read a couple comic books. And one of those was Bring Me the Head of Susan Lomond, a comic by Connor B. from Silver Sprocket. If you are not on the Silver Sprocket digital subscription service, I don't know what to tell you. You're doing something wrong in your life. $15 a month is a lot to ask, but you get everything that Silver Sprocket puts out that month. So if they put out 2 books, you've made the money back essentially digitally. But that is a totally different conversation for us to have. Nonetheless, this book came in and I said, oh, this looks fun. It's a nice little like sapphic comic about a high school evil genius and her plans to ruin her arch enemy's life, Susan Lomond. It's hilarious from start to finish. It is very high school in its thought process, but it feels like the Addams Family, but with a modern twist in terms of who Susan Lomond is and the type of evil shenanigans she wishes to get up to, like putting a bomb on the roof of the school in order to blow up the place where they're going to have their school dance, or trying to bring her old cousin back to life from the dead by putting him into the body of a sculpted giraffe. Like it's absurd. It's very funny, and like the tone of this book sets itself up so perfectly within the first couple of pages that you forgive any of the wild antics that this book brings on. There's no reality to this book. It is just absurd, like Dexter's Lab level, like just ridiculousness and over the top. It's very cute. It's very bright and funny. And I laughed my ass off like the entire time with just how funny it is written from start to finish. So I highly recommend this if you're looking for just like a complete change of pace in all of the comics that you're reading. Bring Me the Head of Susan Lomond is maybe the funniest book I've read in a minute. And I also read Loud and Smart in Color, which is a collection of webcomics, which has one of the funniest comics I've read in like single 4-page or 4-panel comics I've read in a long time that I can't describe, but boy, oh boy, that was also worth every penny just because the guy who puts that book together or puts that comic together is very, very funny. But Bring Me the Head of Susan Lomond is what I want to recommend. But Silver Sprocket, as a publisher, just keeps putting out these incredible collections of comics and original graphic novels. And if you're not checking them out every month, even just to peruse and preview, you are making a huge mistake. Like, they keep putting out incredible books. It's like them, PEOW, like these independent publishers that are putting out these graphic novels and little zines and stuff are doing like the leg's worth of making the best comics available to everybody in the most ways possible, like digitally, physically, however you want to read them, going to festivals and all that stuff. So highly recommend them in general. But man, what a funny comic book. If you guys get it, like I said, take a peek at the preview. But yeah, I don't know how else to describe it other than just very funny and just a whole bucket of laughs. So yeah,
that's an insane deal as well. Like $15 a month, and you get like so much reading.
It's anywhere between 2 and 5 or 8 comics too. Like it varies month to month, just because obviously they can't put out like 40 books a month like Marvel or something. But still, like, if you're getting 2 or 3 graphic novels, like 100, 200 pages each, like that is a killer deal. So highly recommend that. And they get you a little bit of a discount off of physical purchases. So if you want to go buy a book, you get a little bit of a discount too. But enough shilling for Silver Sprocket. They have not paid me. But if you call me, Silver Sprocket, call me.
He's not willing to take a pay.
Exactly. Anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about books that are new or old or just something you're trying to get off of your shelf, comics that are on the top of our pile. I want to shout out some of the folks hanging out with us on Discord today. They gave us a couple books that they're reading. Danny is reading Web of Spider-Verse New Blood #1. He just really wanted me to say that title. I don't want to know what that book's about, Danny. I don't want to know. Jeff is going to be reading.
Over.
Spider-Verse is never over. It's the multiverse. It's always going on, Zach. Jeff is going to be reading Okinawa from our Goodreads reading challenge, which, by the way, nonstop banger comics on that list this year. Everybody who's been reading it has been saying that all of the books are good. I mean, we must be doing something right over here at IRCB if all of our books on our reading challenge are great. Peyton is going to be reading Buddha by Osamu Tezuka. Paul G is reading Charles Burns' Black Hole. And Hugh is going to be reading Storm #6. I guess there must be some good Marvel books if you guys keep reading the Marvel books. I don't know. Someone prove me wrong. But let me kick things back over to you, Nick. What is on the top of your pile? What is the comic you're going to be reading next?
So basically, because I've just finished a graphic novel, I tried to do like a graphic novel and then a prose novel, and then go back to comics. And so I've sort of timed this quite well. So finished, she's running on Fumes, reading a novel at the moment. But then my next comic will be, provided it doesn't get delayed at all, I think it's out mid to late April, will be One for Sorrow, issue 2.
Hell yeah.
Which is by, it's from Distillery, but it's by Jamie McKelvey. And if you haven't read the first issue, it was just spellbindingly beautiful. Like, the art is insane, but the writing, it was one of those books where it was like, I finished it, and similar to like Black Badge or Grass Kings, I just felt like I knew every character's voice. Like, it was in my head. And it was like reading each page, it was like I was fully in that world. Like, I was in 1900s London. I was just, every room you could kind of get a sense of every character's, how they were speaking, like the sound of their voice, like where from London they were, that kind of thing. It really kind of like came off the page. And I finished it, and like my partner, who doesn't read comics at all, awful, but he doesn't read comics at all. And I texted him and I was like, I've just read like one of the best comics I've read in a long time with issue 1. Like this was mad. And I like had to send him the pictures of the art, because I was like, this is crazy.
I mean, Jamie's art is one to sell people on comics, I think, right? Like, I think
Absolutely.
Wicked and Divine and Young Avengers did so much for getting people just interested in comics because of how Jamie draws, right? But anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
It is that thing. It is just like, it's like an absolute powerhouse of a book. Like, his writing is phenomenal. The narrative's like so intriguing as well, because it's like the color and the way that he's done the book is really vibrant, but it's got like a real dark supernatural like thriller aspect to it. And I just think it's like this perfect kind of contrast where you're just like, everything about the book is in some way magic. Like that is the weirdest thing. It would like, probably the best way I can describe it is that it is just like reading magic. And also the distillery format. I know I keep talking about singles, but Distillery is one of those books that I cannot pick up digitally. Just the format, I see it on a shelf and I'm like, I need that.
Sure.
And I love that like oversized format. So like his art just in that book was just phenomenal. So I'm hoping the second issue isn't delayed, because I feel like it's been a while since I've like sunk into that world. So I'm so ready for it. So that's next. That's the next one.
Very cool. Yeah, I think Zach, you were talking about this last time you were on the show, right?
Last time I was on the show, I had just read One for Sorrow #1, and I've been really enjoying everything that I've read from Distillery. And I was like, I'm going to take the stance that if you don't read anything else from Distillery ever, this is the book to read. Like that first issue hooked me so hard and so effortlessly that I was just blown away by it. So I am totally on board with you. I am excited for #2.
Yeah, it's just great, and like it's really it's like really wordy as well, but like the best kind of wordy, where you're just like everybody, like every conversation is like a magnet. You're just stuck into it, and you're just like, this is real gold. And also all the covers are amazing. I think I got like the Annie Wu variant, which is like black and white, and it's just gorgeous. Like I just the whole thing, incredible.
All right, I will actually go read this time, Zach.
See, I told you.
You guys are bullies. I don't know. I genuinely, I do want to check this out, if only because I do want more Jamie art in my life. I kind of want to wait for the hardcover, which means that I'm probably waiting till like 2029, 2030 maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I've seen this. I mean, shout out to Chip over at Distillery. He's given us a little bit of a preview on some of the Distillery books, so I have looked through this issue. I just have not actually sat down to read it. So maybe I'll do that instead of reading Absolute Wonder Woman. I don't know. I can't argue with the fact that Jamie's art looks beautiful in this book, so maybe this is enough of a push. So thank you for the reminder, Nick. I appreciate it. But let me talk about what book is on the top of my pile this week. I am very excited for Monkey Meat, the summer batch. This is Junie Baugh's new start to a mini series of anthology comics within this Monkey Meat world. If you're not familiar with Monkey Meat, I highly recommend you get familiar with it, because it's a very funny anthology book that takes this. I don't know. I guess if you didn't read the last one, let me give you a quick summary. It's super bonkers. It's like this hyper capitalist tourist island where every late stage capitalism idea is running amok. It's perfectly savvy commentary about the state of the world, I think, and paired with Junie Baugh's art, it's absolutely beautiful from start to finish. It's very satirical, it's very in your face and blunt, but I think like Junie Baugh is having a really good time with this super absurd story about these people who live on this island and have basically had their lives destroyed by the tourism industry that is essentially, there's a company name, but essentially is Monkey Meat, or you can buy monkey meat in a can. And what is monkey meat? I don't know. You need to read the comic book, because if I go in to describe it, you're probably not going to want to listen to me talk about anything else for the rest of the day. So it's very gross, but in a fun way. And I think Junie Baugh does a great job of really just, again, punching you in the face with their thoughts and ideas about the state of like imperialistic tourism, and as well as a bunch of other things. So the solicit for this new batch of comics is going on vacation. How about a hellish African fantasy island run by a corporation selling cans of monkey meat? Enjoy our summer vacation format with two tales, games, and double the excitement. It's gonna be fun. I don't know. Junie Baugh is a fantastic artist. They're a great writer. I highly recommend the previous run. Very excited that we're gonna see more, because I know the end of the first 5 issues was like there's gonna be more ? And this is the more, so I'm super pumped about it. Did you guys read Monkey Meat when it was coming out at all?
I haven't read it, but Junie Baugh is amazing. It's kind of been on the list for a while, but I just haven't got around to it.
Paul, if you could please make note of possible episode title, if you're not familiar with monkey meat, ellipses. I just want to put that out there. that pops me.
Listen,
but this sounds fantastic. I want to check this out.
Paul G in the chat is asking me to say monkey meat more times. I don't know why. Did I say it a lot? I don't know. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think if you're looking for just like a quick little read that's just like a bunch of insane comics with a lot of beautiful action and just Juniba flexing on you in front, like constantly with their art, I think you'll have a great time with the first run. This new batch is probably going to be great. So but yeah, Zach, why don't we kick things over to you to wrap it up? What's on the top of your pile?
All right. The one I am going to be reading probably as soon as we finish podcasting today is Let This One Be a Devil, #1. Yes. Dark Horse, Tiny Onion, written, of course, by the one and only James Tynion IV and Steve Fox. Art by Piotr Kowalski. Colors by Brad Simpson. Letters by Tom Napolitano. This one should interest you, Mike, because it takes place in your current home state out in the New Jersey Pine Barrens and deals with the cryptid of the place, the Jersey Devil. Look, if
Dude, you know, I'm already on top of this. Of course, this is this creative team was essentially crafted by me. I don't understand. Like, I came up with this comic book in my dreams, and then it came to life. Okay, that's where we're at.
We'll keep doing that because this looks so good. Like, I mean, if it's horror and it's Tynion, just go ahead and take my money. And
exactly.
And with these new, like, true weird stories he's putting out through Tiny Onion, all about different cryptids. And, like, cryptids are mythological, legendary animals for those unaware. If you're not familiar with monkey meat, like, think Sasquatch and Loch Ness Monster. Yeah, so this sounds like a blast to me. I love this kind of stuff. I'm an avid Supernatural podcast listener, and getting to see these familiar stories kind of come to life is always fun. And Tynion is really into this sort of thing too. He said as much on so many shows, but I feel like it really comes through in his writing, just like on Blue Book, for example, except now it's monster legends instead of aliens. And I love Kowalski's art in this book. It fits so well for the vibe of the story, very etchy at times, great use of shadow and like a bend towards realism, which I've said a billion times that I think it's important for a horror comic to have that. I'm really excited to sink my teeth into this 4-part tale.
Dude, if you like Kowalski's art on this, you should check out Where Monsters Lie, the book that he did with Kyle Starks. Great,
yes.
I mean, incredible work, just absolutely disgusting in terms of horror. But yeah, I'm so hyped for this book. Like, if only because the way that Tynion tackled Bigfoot in Department of Truth is maybe my favorite encapsulation of that book in terms of what it's trying to get across. Again, the Wild Fictions Bigfoot single story that you can just go pick up. I highly recommend. If you just want a taste of Department of Truth and you don't want to get too deep into the conspiracy, that is like a perfect just toe stepper on that. That's not a weird toe dipper. That's the word I was looking for. But yeah, this looks incredible. I've already pre-ordered this at my shop. Like, I'm not buying a lot of physical singles, and yet this is the book that I'm like, it's a James Tynion horror. I'm in. It's Peter Kowalski. I'm in. It's got the Jersey Devil in it. I'm in. Like, all of these boxes are getting checked for me. So I'm trying not to go too wild with the purchasing on it, but yeah, I'm in.
I just love Tynion, like everything. I just finished reading Nice House on the Lake. He was at Thought Bubble, and so I bought like the hardcover of it to get it signed. And afterwards, so I'd read the first volume, and then I was like, well, I'll read the second one, and it's just phenomenal. Like, just this piece of writing, but like everything he is turning out, especially through Tiny Onion at the moment, is just like insane. Like, it is just top tier class.
I don't think he's missed yet. Like, in the X amount of years, like I like, for me anyway, I haven't read any misses.
Sure. Yeah, it's he's had a pretty prolific few years, to say the least. There's a whole bigger conversation we can have about that maybe we'll save for the end of the show or post credits, because I have a lot of ideas around that. But I guess before we wrap up the show completely, we are here to also talk to Nick about Sussex chapters 1 and 2 out on Kickstarter right now. I do want to remind everybody there's a link to the Kickstarter in the show notes. Please go check this out, if only because it's a cool looking book, but it also reads very well. It's a beautifully written book. It's a very beautifully constructed book, at least the digital edition that we got to take a look at for this. So Nick, remind folks again, what is Sussex? And I guess, like, why should people check this out on Kickstarter? What's even the point of all this, Nick?
So Sussex is a psychological thriller that explores mental health through the lens of a spy in World War II. And it is just my way of writing down all of my experiences with anxiety and depression into one book, which also happens to be about a spy. Kind of at an interesting time as well. Like the SOE is kind of like the start of spies and espionage and stuff. So, so if you like spy books, if you like kind of noirs, if you like books that talk about mental health, this is the book for you. And yeah, the artist is a chap called Alvaro Molina, and it's his first book.
Okay.
And his art is just gold. Like, it's just pure magic.
Bonkers good.
Yeah, I always have this experience. I'm really fortunate that like every artist I work with, it's always like I write something on the page and I'm like, oh, I think that'd be pretty cool. And then when the art comes in, you're like, that's a million times better than I thought it would ever be. Like,
sure.
You've taken what I've done and just emphasized it a million times. And this very much was that thing. Like, Alvaro just captured everything, and his use of color was just wild.
Yeah, I mean, Zach, you've got like the best questions written down ever. So I do want to kick over to you, but since you mentioned color, Nick, the color palette in this book is what really just, I was like, whoa, for a book that's about World War II, I feel like the color palette in particular is like so atypical, right? It is brighter. It's, a lot of oranges and reds and yellows. Like, when you were working with Alvaro on this, like, how did you guys collaborate on how you wanted the color palette to look, or was that something that was just on their side and they came back and you were like floored by it? Because it's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of all him, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, usually the way that I write is it's kind of like mostly full script, in that I'll write panels and kind of what's happening and everything. But I always tend to like leave a lot of room for the artist to just kind of do like their take on it. In a way, it's like almost like what I'm putting on the page is like, this is just what needs to happen, and this is kind of how many panels I can kind of imagine it happening in. But generally, every artist I work with, usually there's kind of a conversation of like, oh, I could probably do that in like 4 panels and it would be this or whatever, and it becomes that collaboration, which is amazing. And yeah, with Alvaro, I think the first piece of art he sent over to me, which was kind of like a pin-up of Archie, if I'm remembering right, he had just sort of landed on that color palette where it was like kind of very like orangey, purpley kind of thing. Yeah. I describe it in the Kickstarter as like magic hour.
Totally.
Because it kind of is. And I'd never, it was not something I'd never really put in. Like, I when I was talking to him early on about doing the project, I said, it's kind of up to you if you want to do this black and white or color, because I can go either way. Like, because it's a story about ultimately mental health, like in terms of how the narrative unfolds. Black and white works, but so does color if you want to try out anything kind of crazy. And yeah, he just came back with all these like pages where I was just like, wow. There's a couple of pages, especially later on in chapter 1, where he's done like the night sky and it's like purple and blue and all this stuff, and I was just like, this is insane. So yeah, so the color was very much down to him.
That's great. Yeah, I could definitely see where like you said, black and white would totally work, but like there is a distinct moodiness that you get from the color palette in this book that it's very impressive. Again, totally selling me on just like continuing to want to read this book, just because I want to see how the two of you collaborate to continue to just make that feeling, like evoke those feelings on page with both the writing and the art combined. So, but yeah, Zach, say something. I gotta stop talking.
I mean, the art in this book, it's absolutely gorgeous. I love I don't know if you want to call it like almost like abstract kind of color theory, just using like the cool and warm colors rather than, like you don't need to see their coat is brown, their shoes are black, like you get the gist, and it keeps the mood. Yeah, Mike nailed that on the head. It's like it helps with the mood of the book, and I really, really like that. Honestly, I'm just gonna say it, like, thank you for letting us check out this first issue before talking to you, and you got my money because you did that. Because I was like, shit, this was really good. I'm gonna go buy this now, like, because it is that good. I really appreciate what you guys did with this. So you said on the Kickstarter that this book kind of came, then you just said here that this came out of your experiences with anxiety and depression. And I find it super interesting that you chose a period piece during World War II in an era where men are traditionally known for stoicism and bottling up all of their feelings and never seeking help for them, or even really to try and work through it themselves, because it's an era where mental illness is just weak. You know, it's seen as weakness. So what brought you, like a modern man in a world where working on your internal struggles is seen more positively, to a character like Archie in a period like this to tell a story about mental health and work out some of your own stuff?
That is a great question. So it was the way I kind of landed on it was probably about 10 or 11 years ago. I was going through a really rough patch with anxiety and depression. It was kind of like my first experience where the depression was so heavy that it was affecting day to day. Like it was that kind of thing. And I was looking for kind of like any excuse to get out of the house, like any excuse to try and get away from my head, which I don't know why that was in my house, but like I'd seen 4 walls, I guess. But so I was going on these days out, and I'm massively into history. Like everything I write kind of has a historical element to it. And one of the places I went was Bletchley Park, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's like the home of code breakers. So it's if you've seen The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch, that film is set in Bletchley. And it is kind of like at the heart of espionage and code breaking and stuff. And they had other stories there about spies as well. And because I was going through this rough patch, I just remember reading the story and I was like, I'm utterly broken in the modern day, and like I can get help and I can get meds and people can talk to me and whatever. But like back then there was nothing. And add to that being a spy, like in World War II, which is just all these heightened circumstances, like fear is just constantly in my head for it. And I was like, I don't know how that works. Like, I don't know how you get through that. And so I think that was kind of my way in, was I was just sort of like, what does that look like? Like, what does that look like where the person doesn't have the help that a modern person does, but they're trying to do something that is extraordinary and also new, like in a way, like espionage to that extent was kind of growing. And that was kind of the inner, really. It was just sort of putting those two moments together of, I feel horrendous. And how did these people just do it under any circumstances? Like, how did that person not have anxiety about doing that? Like, how? Right. I didn't understand it. And I just ended up writing the story. Like, it was quite natural. It all sort of like fit together. The only thing that kind of came late, and that was probably like within the last year, was a lot of the narration. So that in my original version wasn't there. It was a bit more straightforward. There was a little bit of narration where Archie sort of talks to the reader, could be a person. And the narration came, like last year I was having a bunch of struggles again. And it was that sort of like, do you know what? Like all of these thoughts that I have about myself, I can put into Archie. Like I can do that. And so it started to just be that kind of thing. It's the like losing yourself in the middle of something is kind of what I was trying to capture. And I think World War II was just kind of the era for it, because it was like incredibly heightened and just horrendous. So yeah, that was kind of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really loved that first page, and like that the way that you open the book with just kind of black, looks kind of like snow, and this narration, and it really opens up with a lot of questions. You know, immediately, like as a reader, you have a lot of questions of like, okay, we're going back in time. This guy has already been through some stuff. Who is he talking to? What has happened to him now since then? I really like that. I like when books start me out and immediately like make me dig in and be like, okay, I want to see what that means. Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah, that credits page was very much a late thing. Like, I think it wasn't there until I think after Alvaro had assembled all the art for the first like chapter. And I've kind of like looked at it as a whole, and I was like, do you know what? I think we need this thing here. Like in another book I'd done a bit where there was like dialogue on a credits page, and I really liked it because it felt kind of like freeing in a way, because you're sort of like, you can just drop a audience or like a reader into just this world instantly. Like there's no imagery, and you're just like in your head imagining what this situation is. And like thankfully this book, because it is framed so much around Archie's kind of inner thought and his figuring out of like who he is or what's going on, that page just like naturally flew together. Like it was one of those things where I was like, this is me opening up the book and essentially saying, this is what I've been going through in my head. Like these questions is me. And it felt right to do it on a page with no art, because it kind of felt a little bit bare. It felt a bit like, do you know what? Like, I'll just put myself out there and say like, I don't know what's going on. So yeah, I'm kind of glad you picked up on it, because yeah, it was one of those things that I was nervous about. I sort of put it in, I was like, this is the first thing people are going to see of this world, and does it fit and whatever. But yeah.
But like, here's the thing, Nick. I didn't expect to get pulled into the book so quickly. And not to say that page was just like, this is it, the book's perfect, right? But like, I've read a fair share of Kickstarter comics, right? We talk about this on the show, quite honestly. I'm a prolific Kickstarter backer just because I truly, truly, truly believe in the platform, right? I haven't read a comic that does something like this like ever from a Kickstarter, and like I didn't expect to be like immediately brought into reading the story on page 2, right? And I think it's a super bold thing to do, and if every Kickstarter comic or every comic book in general did it, I think that it would lose its shine. But nonetheless, it really forced me to be like, okay, whoa, we're actually in the comic. This isn't like 4 pages of Kickstarter preamble. Thanks to all the backers. Here's where you can find us on Instagram, blah, blah, you know, that you get from so many books. Instead, we're just like in the story. And I have to commend you for doing that, because I think it's super risky, right? But your comic does a stupendous job of leaving things open enough to be like, forcing me to ask questions of like, wait, what's actually going on here? Because I know what the premise of the book is, but I didn't expect to start like this. So I don't know. I do have to commend you on that, because it's a really interesting choice, and I think it super works for your comic. Not to just sit here and throw compliments your way, but like it's a bizarre thing to jump into a book like this and have something like that happen. And I think if you weren't here, we'd still be talking about this page, because it's such an interesting choice. So yeah, I don't know. I really like that as well.
I think it works so well for this book because of what this book is talking about. I think it depends, something like that, doing something like that, I think depends on the story matter of the comic. Do you know what I mean? I think for what you're giving us, and also for the mood that Melina gives with the art, it works perfectly. It's just a, perfect glass of chocolate milk, just enough chocolate, just enough milk,
Yeah, thanks. It was definitely one of those things that I think I knew that when I was going to describing the book to people, like as I was working on it as well, I kept saying it was sort of like a spy story set in World War II. And in the back of my head, I was like, I need to like figure out a way of like making sure people don't think it's going to be like an action romp. Because I remember talking to a lot of people and they were like, oh, it's kind of like a Bond thing then. It's a bit like Fleming, because it's like he came from World War II. And I was like, no, like I need to steer away from that a little bit. And I think that first kind of like credits page with the narration, just when I wrote it, I was like, I feel like this sets the scene, because it's like you're not going into the book and being like, do you know what, this is going to be guns blazing. It's more like about what's going on in this guy's head and people trying to help and get it back. Yeah, so thanks. I really appreciate it.
Definitely, I definitely got that vibe from it. I mean, like, I don't know, this feels like a comic that's about like the between times of action, which is very like very interesting perspective to take on a spy thriller. And I love spy thriller like movies and TV and stuff. I feel like I'm turning into a curmudgeon-y old like 65-year-old man who will just like put on the same 19 movies or TV shows that's just like whatever about espionage and whatever. But I am curious though, like what is your background in like spy everything, right? Are you a big James Bond fan? Did you just watch Slow Horses and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do some kind of spy thing? I guess like what kind of stuff are you into, I guess, in the genre? Or if you're not at all, like, I don't know, what do you take from?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much love like any of it. So like Slow Horses is amazing, which is obviously kind of the current one, but I think like Bond is always great as well. Like I'm a Brit, so I feel like I have to say it. Otherwise I'll take my passport away or something. But I love Bond, but for me it was kind of always Le Carre. So like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Okay.
The Night Manager, those kind of things, where it was really like, some people would describe it as like too slow or whatever, but for me it was kind of like always about kind of like an ambiance thing. It was like the feel, it was like thematically you feel like you're in a world where like the stakes are insanely high, but nobody's sort of saying it. Like nobody's sort of saying this is what's at play. You just sort of know it, and it's that sort of like looming dread a little bit of like, if something goes wrong, like it will seriously go wrong. And so
tension.
Like Le Carre's kind of always been in the back of my head when I was writing it. And I think other than that, like what kind of drew me to making it a bit spy rather than kind of like just a general anxiety, depression, war story, was the time period as well. Like again, as I was saying, kind of like I always write something with like some historical basis. And I think like World War II, I'm always very interested in either home life, like people who were not on the front lines, and like what effect did that have on them, because it's obviously like a real heavy burden to watch somebody go to war, and like at that time didn't have a mobile phone, you didn't have any of that, so it's like your disconnect from that person is even more. And I think for a spy it was even more so because it was new. Like you literally couldn't really talk about it because nobody knew who to trust or what to do or whatever. And that was kind of where that first like actual page, like the first kind of comic page comes together. It's like this conversation with Archie's like fiance, and I in my head I always had this like line of her just sort of saying like, I'd be a widow before I'm even married. Like what's the term for that? And it was that kind of thing of the shock of sort of realizing that this person is involved in the war effort, but not in the way that I thought. And what effect is that having on me? So those things were always in my head, and trying to tie that with Le Carre in my head and piece it all together is kind of how we ended up with Sussex, I guess. It was a lot of components.
No, that's great. That's great. I love that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think I yearn the most for when I'm reading or like trying to get into any kind of spy story in general, is like, it doesn't need to be all action James Bond kind of stuff. And it's funny because there's a bunch of James Bond comics that I think deal with this exact thing, where they try to steer away from the action and try to build that tension. And those are the types of stories that I enjoy the most, because I, again, find myself just slowly but surely just leaning into more spy espionage things as I get older. But yeah, like it is the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy type stories where I'm just like, it's all tension until we get to this, big end of whatever it may be. That I always end up enjoying the most. Not to say that the Daniel Craig Bond movies aren't fun, because they're cool, they're super fun. But the tension in those movies, I think, is where you get the most. I personally get the most enjoyment. So I'm glad to hear that that's what drew you, or what also drives you for that kind of stuff, because you can feel it in Sussex. You totally can feel it
already.
Thanks. I'm glad it came across. I'm glad it kind of worked. Because it was one of those things that, again, like trying to put that into a comic was kind of a bit of a struggle. Like I realized that with prose, like I write novels as well, and with prose you can obviously go into a level of detail that creates like tension. And with comics, you're relying on panel structure, you're relying on the visuals and the lettering and stuff. But with films as well, like part of what creates that tension is like score. It'll be like the sounds. And like that will just put you in the area. Like the score for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is phenomenal. And it like really helps kind of put you in that mind frame. And I was like, I have to somehow find my way in with all of this. And so especially in kind of like chapter 2, we play a bit more with like panel structure and kind of like what you can do with comics in terms of trying to create that tension or like that breaking point. That was always something we wanted to kind of do. And as the story goes on, like it's 4 chapters in total. And as it kind of moves towards its end, a lot of that comes to play. Like it is very much like, how can we use comics as a medium to tell this story of mental health? Like how can we do anxiety? How can we do depression in comics? As well as like make it interesting kind of thing. So yeah, thanks.
I loved the characters that you've presented to us. It's really easy to get the vibe for them just through the either the art or a combination of the art and just the conversations that are being had. And I think that really helps solidify this book for me. Like, I feel like I know Archie, or I'm getting the vibe of who Archie is, and I love the little changes in him. Like, at one point he says, like, always be looking forward, never looking back. But what are we really doing this entire time is looking back. And I think that's really fun. But also, and I won't give away the specifics of it, but we get introduced to a character, and we find out what brought them into the war, or like what brought them into what they're doing. And the conversation is being had by two other people discussing him, and then we go to just a quiet frame of a close-up on his face, and he's got these kind of sad eyes, and you see just in that image exactly what was just being talked about like why he is there. And I think that made me realize that the two of you are a perfect team for this, because it's clear that you are on the same wave in everything. Like, you are hitting the same beats as far as the writing and the art, and I think that's what I appreciate about this book.
Thanks, that means a lot. Yeah, it really comes from like both of us like absolutely loving comics as well, like, which feels really appropriate for this podcast. But
yeah.
Like, that was kind of one of the things that Alvaro and I have like talked about, kind of probably more than the book, like more than Sussex itself, is just sort of talking about like other comics and creators we like and all that kind of thing. And I always think that's really important on any book you work with, to at least know like where everybody's kind of drawing their inspirations or their interests or their likes from. And I think that helps to shape the book in some way. And I think that's definitely been it for Sussex, is that I think we both kind of have said influences, and it's been like, oh, okay, yeah, I know where you're coming from for that, so I'll try and capture that in this way. And like the second chapter I sort of wrote after Alvaro delivered the art for the first one, and so I was able to kind of like tailor the second chapter a bit more to his art, knowing what he was kind of doing with it. And I think that's kind of really helped. I think that's kind of like, you shouldn't notice a difference really between the two, because we should still be in sync, but I think it kind of just helps, because at least then I can kind of do those things where it's play with panels or play with framing or whatever, and kind of try and just constantly hammer home like the theme, I guess, is the kind of thing. Like, that was probably the big difference that last year made on the book, is where I said I changed the narration, is I was stripping back so much dialogue. Like, if you'd read it a year ago, there was way more dialogue, like way more, and I like really kind of like pulled it back, because I was just kind of like, do you know what, I think this speaks for itself, this says it is obvious, this kind of thing. And it was that kind of like, yeah, let's thin it out. So thanks, I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, that is a great point to end on here. Got a fantastic comic that you guys can all get on Kickstarter today. 2 chapters of it, Sussex chapters 1 and 2. There's a link again in the show notes. I guess, Nick, for folks that are curious, they want to reach out to you, they want to talk to you, they want to ask you questions about Sussex or anything else that you've put out, where can they find you on the internet? They
can find me on Blue Sky or on Instagram. I believe it's the same handle, which is Goody182.
Okay.
They can find me there. Also, if you happen to be a writer or creating a comic at all, there is also a tier on our Kickstarter where you can get editing services with myself, so I can put the 12 years of writing comics and an MA to use, essentially, and help you craft your comic or whatever you're working on creatively.
Sick.
So yeah, a couple of ways to catch me.
Cool. Well, yeah, we'll make sure we've got links to all that stuff in the show notes. Are you just a big Blink-182 fan, or you just have a different association with that number?
Yeah. I'll it's always been in my DNA. And
hey, listen, I'm right there. I saw them at the Mets Stadium last summer, and it was an emotional event. I totally feel you. Cool. I guess with that, I want to say thank you to Zach and Paul for being on the show with us. I guess Paul's proof listening. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an absolute pleasure. In the post credits, I do want to bug you a little bit more about the Oscars, so I think we'll do that just a little bit. But thank you to everybody listening live on Discord. You are fantastic human beings. If you haven't checked out the IRCB Kickstarter, what are you doing? There's 2 links to Kickstarters in this post. You better click on both of them, especially the IRCB one. I'm sorry, Nick, I have to sell my own stuff first, okay? IRCB.FYI/zine. Please go there and check it out. It's live. 20 artists, 28 pages. It's incredible stuff. Thank you again, everybody out there, for listening. Thank you, Zander, for editing our show. And as we say on every episode of IRCB, comics are good, and so are you.